First, we have Harinder Singh, who probably needs very little in the way of a formal introduction, but in case you've been hiding under a rock and have never heard this man speak, let me tell you a little bit about him. He's the co-founder of SikhRI and the Punjab Digital Library. He's an activist educator that is motivated by love and justice, who currently serves as an organizer of the Free Akal Takht, the movement to engage Sikhs in the world in developing and enacting the self-governance model for collective decision-making. He studied Sikhi as part of his journey of religions and philosophies to make conscious choice. And because of Sikhi's impact in South Asia, he'll be speaking about Bhai Vir Singh Ji's vision and leadership. And he's drawn to Bhai Vir Singh Ji for his grandness, his simplicity, and his determination. Please welcome Harinder Singh.
Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh, and good morning. Thank you, Jesse Kaur. Before I start, you're going to hear all sorts of nouns and adjectives to describe Bhai Vir Singh, and at a personal level, Pitaji, and tributes from luminaries of South Asia and other places. This morning when I took the hukum, and BVS, short for Bhai Vir Singh, was on my mind, because I'd been reading his poetry late last night and reading about other things. This morning I got up, I heard the hukum from Darbar Sahib, and the line I picked, I think it describes him. So this is the line I want to share with you to start with, because I don't think there is a better tribute than this line. And this is a hukum from Darbar Sahib Amritsar. It says, Antar Jot, Nirantar Bani, Sache Sahib Seon Livlai. Now, to put it in context, the Shabad by Guru Nanak Sahib is talking about Indic tradition of who a Bairagi is. And generally understood idea of Bairagi is somebody who's a renunciator. Somebody who is, if you want to go by the etymology, they call it in Sanskrit Bairagi, which means dispassionate. And Guru Nanak redefines it. And Guru Nanak Sahib redefines it through this Shabad, which I think, if you want to see example in last 100 years of who is a Sikh Bairagi, because for us, Rag literally means color, by the way. In the Sikh traditions, when you say even the poetry of Bhai Vir Singh, including how Professor Puran Singh presents it, they start to write Rag, Rang Rag. So it becomes love, not just the color. Bairag means people who have gone beyond color, which means they are not the renunciates in the Sikh tradition. They are not the dispassionate ones, but the ones who are able to engage in the world and still be loving in the divine sense. Now look at this line. This is redefined Bairagi, and you have a 20th century embodiment of who Bairagi is in Sikh tradition. Jide andar jyot hai. Jyot is light, so light within. And Nirantar is incessant. Nirantar what? Nirantar is where something which is continuing all the time. And it says Nirantar Bani. The wisdom is incessant. The Bani is wisdom, essentially. And he lived Bani. And this is what he describes, whether it's poetry or whether it's plays or whether it's even his political writings. And yes, I will talk about those as well. Bani is Nirantar. And this is the life of a Sikh. Bani is Nirantar. It's not just a name at a particular time in a day or particular occasion. Sache Sahib. And for that individual, where there's this incessant wisdom and there's a light within, then what is Guru to you? Then the Guru becomes Sacha, which is eternal, and Sahib, which is sovereign. You just heard Jesse Kaur describe through the translation of Sanmit Kaur of a letter where it says you belong to an emperor. And we understand that, but do we get it when the poet is telling us that you do belong to emperor? It is not going to be a sovereign to you if the Bani is not Nirantar within you. So this incessant Bani, you will stop using other words, adjectives and nouns to describe what the Guru is to you. It becomes Sacha Sahib, the eternal sovereign. And Seon Livlai, and you live in direct connection with that consciousness. This describes Bhai Vir Singh to me. This is the hukum from Darbar Sahib today. And let's build on this. I have basically a couple of objectives in my presentation. My one objective is, do we really know the man? Let's get to know him a bit, the man element. Because even within his novels, he talks about divinity in human form, and I'll come to that soon. Otherwise, we are separated. And when you are separated, sometimes it becomes too abstract, and we don't even know where to go find the divine or look for the divine. So, do we really know the man? I want to get to know the man maybe in a vastness of him, his grandness. And the second element is challenge you to look at somebody who has done what he has done in the last 100 years. He was the most dangerous man to the British, and I'll talk about that too. Why was he dangerous? What was he up to? Was he just writing poetries because I or some elder remembered a poem because that was part of the curriculum when you were studying in Punjab? Or is it something more than that? So why is he dangerous even today? Is he to be invoked only when we are in pain? Of course he understands the pain. Or only to be seen as a poet? Of course he's a poet, but he's much bigger than that. But he definitely is driven by divine poetic impulses. So let's get to know the man, his vastness, and also the impact he generated because of his vastness. And that's what made him a very, very dangerous, with a capital D, I'll call it, because he was a mass educator at large. Okay. Presentation is not working. Oh, it is working. So I'm going to start with, there's a delay. There we go. This was the music you were listening to when you came in. This is the one which is my favorite poem. So let's start with personal angle first. You probably have heard this. If you haven't, you can read the translation. But essentially, he's talking about his focus. Seene khich jina ne khadi, o kar aram nahi bende. You can read the translation. I'm not big fans of any of the translations. But I think it captures a lot of elements for those of us who are not native Punjabi speakers. But he's basically saying, if you are in love, if you have that pull, you cannot sit still. That's the contemporary way to understand it. Niho wale naina di neender o dine raat pai vende, they're constantly flowing, like a river. River is flowing regardless of what people are doing to the river. Like today we have environmental terrorisms too, right? What happens to rivers and the dams and other things. So this is what your environment is going to affect you. But if you have that pull, doesn't matter what the environment is, you're flowing. And what happens because you are focused, ikko lagan lagi lai jandi hai tor onant onadi. They're focused, they're walking, they're on the path. And they keep walking because they're focused. Because what is their focus? Vaslon ore muqam na koi, so chal paye nitrande. Vaslon ore. Before the union, other than the union, other than being with the beloved, nothing else matters. And you know when somebody is in love. Vaslon ore is the union with a capital U here. Like I'm in love. This is Gurbani where it says, Raj na chahu, mukta na chahu, man preet charan kamlare. I am in love and I'm going to flow in this love. It doesn't matter what the weather is, doesn't matter what the mood is, doesn't matter what the political situation or economic absurdities we face. And this is what happens when you have the pull. The only time I have actually heard this was, that's why I played that Chitra Singh and Jagjit Singh. This is part of the Ichbal. And by the way, I was just in Kashmir in April. I wanted to go where he wrote this. It's a spring. It's about an hour and a half from Srinagar. Unfortunate, they had a curfew that day. If you've been following the Kashmir news, what's been going on. And we still wanted to go, but then, there were a lot of rocks being thrown, so we were not able to go. The point is, he wrote that it's a spring which is asking a question, and this is a response to that question, why it continues to flow. So his idea of nature and other things comes into being. Ichbal is, I think it's his own journey as well. It's very, of course, the poet writes about himself and the observations he has, but this is about those who have the pull, what they do, the focus they have in their lives. Okay, we are struggling with this, so let's see. Now, there are other tributes, and I want to quickly cover some tributes just to give you what people thought of him. This is Taniram Chatrik. If you're not aware of him, in 1935, the post-1935 phenomena in Punjab was called the progressive poets, and he's the leader of those progressive poets. He worked for Bhai Vir Singh. He was mentored by him. This is what he said about Bhai Vir Singh. So not just what the Sikhs said, but the whole renaissance which was brought into subcontinent of South Asia, which now we call India and Pakistan, and he's from Lahore as well. But this is what he had to say. He actually called Bhai Vir Singh love incarnate. Just think about that. You hear about in Indic tradition incarnations, the God incarnations from the Hindu traditions. He actually is saying the world hadn't seen a love incarnate, and this is Bhai Vir Singh. And I underlined certain things. You know about the saint poet idea. He's calling him, he's the man of nature. Other things are there, but let me just cover a couple of other things. I think I'm going to need somebody's help because this is not working. Mr. Kohli, and he wrote this critical appraisal book, but I'm going to focus on the underlying part here. He basically says, anyone who has come after him as a poet, as a literary figure, owes him. So we just know maybe some Sikh element, not even the vastness of Sikh elements, but he affected the whole milieu of writers and poets, people who did apprenticeship under him, people who worked for him under his newspaper company. Some of them left, started their own things, but he affected literally anything and everything which started, and he called him a master artist. Now, I don't think we can appreciate this thing unless we understand poetry's, what is Emerson in this world, or what is Dante in other worlds. And this is the kind of status this guy is carrying, Puran Singh compares lots of things to Walt Whitman. So this Bhai Vir Singh will be somebody who inspired Walt Whitman. Think of that level. Okay. Now, this is from Dr. Harbans Singh. Nikki Panji is sitting here, so this is from her dad. Dr. Harbans Singh, if you look at what he says, he says there are different ways to look at him, and here is one way to look at him. And he says, Bhai Vir Singh stands as a link between two eras. You heard what was happening from Jesse Kaur earlier. There was conversions, not just by Christians, but Brahmo Samaj movement. This was a major movement which was converting Sikhs back into the Hinduism. And then you have Semitic traditions coming. And Bhai Vir Singh is aware of all the onslaught from religious angle, political angle, the infighting happening with the government, with the Mahants of the time. In that arena comes Bhai Vir Singh, who is connecting what? He's the link between the two eras. What is the earlier era? Sikhs were rulers in Punjab. The new era is Sikhs are in chaos. And he's trying to bring back some system in this madness and how to bring two traditions of Punjabi learning, old and new. What are the two traditions? The indigenous learning and the formal learning. So if anything, he's actually the integrator. He is looking at the best available things available, best available tools for learning, both the homegrown systems, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਸੰਪਰਦਾ ਆਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. Just so you know, there is a whole tradition of ਗਿਆਨੀ ਸੰਪਰਦਾ. And Bhai Vir Singh is a forerunner, interpreter of ਗਿਆਨੀ ਸੰਪਰਦਾ in Gurbani Pranaliyan. So he led that movement when the Gyani Samprada started. Okay, now what is he? He essentially, and look at this other line which I underlined, it says, the Punjabi literature debt to him is permanent. People can try, and people are trying, I'll talk about some of that, because he's so big, because he's done amazing stuff. He's more than an institution in himself, so there are posthumously attacks on him. There were attacks at the time too, and I'll talk about some of them because he is too big. And they can't, so they think by demolishing him, maybe they can demolish some ideas of Punjabiness and some ideas of Sikhi. Well, they are mistaken because he's still standing tall after 100 years. So a little bit about him. Here's a picture when he's a young man. He always did not have the white beard. So that's another thing we have to get out of. She said it. Jessie Kaur said it. He was 17 when he's doing this. Can you imagine at 17 thinking about the chaos in your community? Chaos under imperialism of, the British imperialism, chaos in your gurdwaras, which were being run by utterly corrupt mahants. He's witnessing all this, and he is a late teenager, essentially. This is This is, we know about Udham Singh sitting in America. This is the guy who's inspiring multiple Udham Singhs. So he's the man behind the revolutionaries, is another way to look at it. And of course, you can read his biodata, you can read other things about him. What I want you to know is he does have an ancestral connection to big Sikh history. When the Sikhs in the middle of 18th century used to call somebody Dewan Kaudamal, Sikhs actually used to call him Mithamal. This is the man, when genocides were going on, when Sikhs were being hunted by 20,000 horse forces who were literally designed to go hunt every Sikh. This was the man in Lahore who eventually became a governor, who sided with the Sikhs, who tried to protect the Sikhs. He was the ancestor of Bhai Vir Singh. So there is a connection. The connection is Kaudamal and Jassa Singh Ahluwalia were friends, just to put it in perspective, 100 years before Bhai Vir Singh became active in the Sikh field. So he knows, not everyone in your family is going to be great, but there's inspiration there that, we do have people in our community. Yes, my Nana ji is a writer, and yes, my Dada ji and Dad did translations and other works and did other literary works, but we also have people, when there were genocides going on, they showed us how to protect Sikh interest, even when nobody would stand. Literally, the price for standing with Sikhs was you will be killed yourself. That's where he's coming from. That's sort of his background. Now, you can use any words to describe him. There are few words written here, but I think there's nothing better than the one the hukum I read today, which basically means that the Bani lived in him incessantly, and he was completely absorbed in it, and he was answerable only to his eternal master, who we call sovereign, which is the divine. Okay, so more things about him. Yes, there are other things you heard a little bit about when he passed. He actually became a doctor still. He never practiced that. So it's not, sometimes we think because today we have become small. Because we are small, we think people who do these things must not have certain aptitudes if they get involved in Sikh issues. That's not the case. He's a linguist. He is educated man. He understands medicine as well. He understands history, literature. He understands what is happening in Europe at the time, when the newspaper was becoming the tool to fight what we now call the nation states of Europe. He's completely aware of all those things, and he is involved in both systems. What does he produce? And I want to talk about some samples, but before we talk about what he produced, what does he say about himself? It's important to know that. It's like, we all hear about what Guru Nanak Sahib said, but do we ask what Guru Nanak Sahib says about himself? So this will be another way to look at how a votary of Guru Nanak, how a poet of Guru Nanak, a servant of Guru Nanak says about himself. And I'm just going to talk about one line. You can read it in the interest of time, but it basically says, Meri छिपे रहन दी चाह, ते छिप टुर जान दी, हाँ, पूरी हुंदी नाहे मैं तरले ले रहा. Dil tarang, dil is heart, tarang is a wave. He's basically like, I want to be hidden. So, we have these dilemmas too. I hear this from other people, some of them who are very close to me, that they want to hide. But do we really have that choice when you know what needs to get done? He writes about this. He's writing what he really wants for himself, but he also knows that he's been blessed. And because he's been blessed, he's in certain situation, he chooses to write and get involved, become active, and that's what I want to focus on. Otherwise, he's writing, and we all go through these stages, and this is one of his stages where he's describing, this is what I really want, but sometimes your I want becomes much bigger, because what does the we? Today we call it, what does the Panth need? What does the Qaum need? What does the community need? And people who are developed, people who want to be hidden, they need to really think about, is that the only thing you should be doing? Okay, so his writings have various flavors, nature, divine longing, love, separation, intellect versus inspiration. You can read more about it. Some scholars have done a beautiful job of describing this, but I want to just I want to start with the poetry and then go to his political writings. So he is a poet. These are the 4 major works, but he has done more books. I just want you to look at even the titles of his books. Garlands of Wave, Lehran de Haar, Matak Hulare, Brisk Swinging, Garlands of Lightning, Bijliyan de Haar. This is probably the least read one. I will be surprised if people have read this one, because this one had political writings as well. People didn't know how to deal with it, and they're like, oh, what happened to this man? Because he's got those poetries too. When Jallianwala Bagh massacre happened, I'll get into that. What does he write? What is he writing about being Indian in the context of anti-British? Bijliyan de Haar, look at Garlands of Lightning. We like soft stuff sometimes. Soft stuff's important. It's internal stuff. But whatever you have internally comes out externally in the realities you're facing. And then much later in his life, which is what he's much known for now, because that Indian government gave him a prize for. It's a great book, is Mere Saiyan Jiyo, which, oh my dearest beloved divine. Those are some of his major writings. There are other small poems he's written, but these are collections of poems. All I want you to know is what he was writing. As I mentioned, in 1930s, the progressives start to copy him because this genre did not exist in Punjabi literature. And then postmodernists now try to look at him as well in 1960s and the 1980s, and they still don't know how to deal with him. And some of them, that's why attack him out of jealousy or maybe other reasons. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they don't have that being, which we generally call soul, to even grasp and get touched by it, which is what was quoted earlier as well. He is the first poet, and I'm using poet here intentionally, and I know gurus were more than poets, but he's the first poet after the gurus who actually invoked songs, it should have said songs of birds and trees and animals and flowers and rivers and springs and so on, and mountains and seas. He's the first poet in Punjab who does that. From Guru Nanak period, or Guru period, let's call it, there are 200 plus years of gap. There is no poetry, and you can look at, there are about 17 standard texts available of poetry between after Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj until Bhai Vir Singh. Nobody's invoking these things because they're involved in other campaigns. There's an 18th century history is very different, and not very many Punjabis are coming. So he is really connected with nature as Guru Nanak asks us to be connected with nature. And he invokes that. Even when he's talking about stream, he was talking about himself. Ki ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਟੋਰ ਕੀ ਹੈਗੀ, ਅਨੰਤ ਹੈਗੀ. Now, much more in nature, but I'll just mention one thing. In Punjabi poetry, he identifies himself as a kikkar tree. Now, kikkar tree is a very common tree of Punjab. But he says, I'm not just an upward, but upward towards what end? And he says, Val akasha java. Kikkar tree, otherwise a very common tree, which means I'm a commoner too, but my aspiration is to touch the divine and keep moving upward. This is about elevation in life. And this is the kind of stuff he does. If you look at the fourth line, for example, where he says, Phulla, phalla, kheda, ras chova. I don't even know if we can even capture ras chova in English properly. Kade ਅਸੀਂ nectar ਬੋਲਾਂਗੇ, ਕਦੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ elixir ਬਣਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ. ਬਟ ਇੱਕ ਸਵਾਦ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਕਰਦਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ. That's ras chova. Ras has many meanings. Ras is not just flavor. Ras is much more. Ras in the musical tradition becomes the rags, harmonies, and rags, moods, and what it does to you. Ras in physical life. In Guru Granth Sahib, it actually says we have no idea. Ras kas na janant. We actually don't know what are the good flavors of life. And he's trying to go show us those flavors. From music, from poetry, from his activism. Little bit about the divine longing idea, this separation, this birha, this bairag, as we talked about from today's hukum. And this is where he talks to himself. Meri jinde, tera thaon kise nadi de kinare, tera thaon kise jangal bele. This is Walt Whitman-esque ideas, if you've read him in the Songs of Myself and the Afternoon with the Self kind of ideas, where he says, my being, not soul. And Dr. Kaur has done a beautiful explanation of that when you do translations, Sikh translation, the soul does not capture it, it's the being. My being, ਮਤਲਬ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੰਦਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਨਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਜੀਅ ਨੂੰ, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੀਓ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ ਨਾ, the thing which keeps you alive, you're talking to that within you. And it says, you belong to some river bank, you belong to some jungle. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਿੱਖ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਰਿਲੇਟ ਕਰਕੇ ਦੇਖੋ. Why is it that the gurus are constantly invoking rivers and at the river banks and constantly, even when Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj's seemingly toughest time is shown, it is in the Machhiwada jungle. He understands and brings all those into cultural angles, which the average Punjabi understood. You are meant to fly in the sky. ਦੇਖੋ ਲਾਈਨ ਕੀ ਹੈ, ਤੇਰੇ ਭਾਗਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਰਸ਼ਾਂ ਤੇ ਉੱਡਣਾ, ਅਰਸ਼ਾਂ ਤੇ, the heavens. ਅਰਸ਼ਾਂ ਤੇ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਉੱਡੀਦਾ? Have we even thought about that level of spiritual flight? So he's gone to those levels. Then he writes multiple novels. You can read the list, but I'm going to share one or two ideas on this. One thing I want you to know, you heard this, what now we call feminist ideas. Every single novel he wrote, the protagonist is a woman. Punjabi didn't have novels before him. What does that tell you about how he really understood what's going on in Punjab? He used some historical fiction, and he also used what he saw, how the men were preying on women. And yes, he writes like that. And let me give you that example. I'm going to use one example of that, which is a very famous work. This book, this novel, is generally called Baba Naud Singh. First thing I want to tell you is that is engendering itself, because that's not what he wrote. When it's being republished, they've changed the title to Baba Naud Singh. The full title actually is this, and this is how he wanted it. It says, Subhag Ji da Sudhar, Hathi Baba Naud Singh. It actually is about Subhag. It's about a woman. Who is this woman? Somebody who was a young Jain widow, whose name is Jamuna, who becomes at some point Domeli, at some point Fatima. But when he comes in touch with the Sikh inspiration, she's called Subhagji, the fortunate one. While the men pray, you can look at it. She goes through all sorts of things. So imagine a single woman today, and you know what she faces today. Somebody who's widowed, she faces even much worse stuff. Within the Punjabi and South Asian context, some of you might know that. If you don't talk to one, and you'll find out how bad it is even today. He's capturing that how does a young Jain widow survive when she's being dealt by preachers? She has to deal with the lawyers. She has to deal with the missionaries, because everyone is preying on her. Everyone. And what are they doing? Well, I've written there, avarice, lust, and sin in men's depravity and pious garbs. They all act religious, and they're converting her for her. She's still object. Remember 100 years ago, you heard this in the context we're dealing with? Even the women's suffrage movement hadn't started, or the voting right hadn't happened yet. This is the cultural milieu. He chooses, this is not PC work, guys. This is not politically correct stuff. This is not popular stuff. But the way he does it, this created a havoc, a storm in Punjab. Of course it was going to. And it is going to be a young guy who understands relationships and divinity, who figures out how to deal with one of the toughest situations or the things around him. And this is where Baba Naud Singh is not the man, it's the divine in human form. This is where it becomes about what is a simple behavior of a Sikh and simple life. And I think, yeah, the service and sacrifice which you hear about, but the second part we forget. We might have some service and sacrifice, but if you don't have a vibrating music in daily life, you're not going to understand Baba Naud Singh. And if you can't read it, now there are audiobooks available. Please go listen to it. You can download it, get a copy. This is an amazing work on how a young woman who was at the brink of a suicide because what society has done to her is somehow comes in touch with a simple homestead man named Baba Naud Singh, and what happens in her life because of the simple inspiration in average life. This is an amazing novel. Rana Surat Singh, I'll quickly talk about it. Actually, let me Let me just say this much about it. You know, if you really, this is maybe incomplete and immature of me, but I've read about 80 translations of Japji Sahib, and I'm not satisfied with any of them. But when I read this novel, and in this novel, how Bhai Vir Singh brings the explanation of the 5 khands of Japji, I was like, oh man, this is bliss. He captured it. He figured out how to explain it beyond, this, what in academia or some translators or some grammarians, whatever we call them, they just haven't been able to do it. He is the one where, this whole khand idea, the realms of existence, from Taram to Sach. Taram is something which is embodied. That's how he explains it. And Sach is something which is unembodied. We are trying to go there, and in between are these stages of Gyan and Saram and Karam. He's actually showing in a very practical, and even in relationship between Rana Surat Singh and Rani Raj Kaur. So it's a relationship. Within that relationship, he's showing how do you go to eternal in this life, from embodiment, from a physical life of disciplines and actions or whatever you want to call it, to unembodiment, which means you become, the word he uses is, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਿਰਾਕਾਰ ਵਰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਚਲੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ, something which is formless. So this is not abstract philosophical stuff. This is taking things which you can't even figure out even today how to explain, and he figures out how to tell that in a novel. This is the kind of stuff which psychologists will die to understand, and a great novelist like Dostoevsky will die to figure out how to explain. Because he also worked on the sickness of the soul, if you read The Idiot and other novels. But Bhai Vir Singh did it. He did it successfully. He took something which even Sir Muhammad Iqbal, when he was asked to explain Japji, he said it cannot be done. And Bhai Vir Singh did it. And he did it for an average Punjabi reader through a relationship between a man and a woman. Okay, so his creative genius. Let's talk a little bit more about that. In Persian, there is something called rubai. He created a new meter in Punjabi, which now is called turai. This is like when you create a new rag. This is master artist. I'm explaining how he's a master artist. Punjabi didn't have a genre of turai. He developed one. Persian muse is called rubai. Rubaiyat, Omar Khayyam de kaiyan ne padhe hone ne. When you have collection of rubais, he created turais. So that should tell you already where he is. He's mastered the existing systems and now developed and offered as a gift to humanity a new system. I don't think we should shy away from calling him the Bhai Gurdas of 20th century. Because that's what he is. He is doing a lot of work, and some of you already heard about it. I'm going to explain a little bit more, but let's just actually do a quick survey before I get into it. Just his Sikh literature. So far, I haven't touched the Sikh literature. That was all Punjabi literature. Now the Sikh literature. I mean, editing, explanations, commentaries of Bhai Gurdara's work, Gurmukh Jivan, Sandesh and Sikhya, Gurmat Naam, Bandagi, Das Gurkha, it continues on and on. Explanation of Sikhan di Bhagat Mala, you know what that is? Just think of this. We say we don't have scholarship. Sikhan di Bhagat Mala is Bhai Mani Singh's explanation of Bhai Gurdas's war. And he's explaining that now. So he knows how to carry the tradition forward, how to connect the dots in history, interpretations over centuries, and he makes some, remember connecting the two eras? He's linking them. And he obviously is the one, people were not aware of Gurpratap Suraj Granth, the 16-volume poetic history of the Sikhs. He's the one who annotated and edited and brought it to light. Just the sheer volume of stuff. Then his work on Guru Granth Sahib. His commentaries in up to 6 volumes before he left this world, and his dictionary of Guru Granth Sahib. I want to tell a story there. Several years ago, I was running some project in Punjab. I heard about that Professor Puran Singh's granddaughter is in Mohali, and as crazy as I am, I like to go visit people like that. I just showed up at her door. She's like, who the, she didn't say, who the hell are you? But you can imagine, munda ki kari janda itthe. I said, I heard you're his granddaughter. I just want to see you, meet you. Tell me something about him. And we talked for a couple of hours. And then she goes and brings a book. And she gives me this book. She's like, I don't know much about him, but I think you're the right man for this book. She gives me that. That was the second edition of Guru Granth Kosh. In the second edition of Guru Granth Kosh, which Bhai Vir Singh did, Professor Puran Singh wrote its foreword, which was not available anymore. And in that foreword, he has 16 or 18 pages where he's describing how to look at the words of Guru Granth Sahib, the aesthetics we call it today. This is how deeply these guys were working on things. Guru Granth Kosh is amazing. Get the second edition republication because we need an approach on how to look at words of Guru Granth Sahib. And then his satiks, Panj Granthi, I use Panj Granthi satik quite a bit. His Das Granthi satik is available as well. Then his, we call him recreation of Sikh history in the Chamatkars. How to talk about Guru Nanak. The best biography of the Prophet I have read is written by Martin Lings on Prophet Muhammad. And I wish somebody would write something light on Guru Nanak. Bhai Vir Singh has already done it. We just need somebody who can do it in English. This is what he did. He took everything available as the initial literature, historical accounts of Sikhs, and he intermixed them with Gurbani and presented to them, which we could understand in the 20th century when he wrote it. And he knew people couldn't afford it, so he did not publish unaffordable books. And we'll talk about it a little later. He published them in tracts, so average person can see it and read it and get inspired by it, not just in Punjab, but somebody sitting in Hong Kong as well at the time. Okay, so I want to just tell you what he himself said about what he wrote, because you can read other people what they think about what he wrote. So this is Bhai Vir Singh about what he is writing, and I'll just focus on this underlined thing. He says, although those accounts are more in the nature of the angel's wings in a painting, they reveal the real truth. So he's basically saying, we actually don't have enough spiritual writings, and that's what he went after. Where you're not going to get siddhe answer. Punjabi vich mein kehna, yaar mainu das do ki kariye. He's not interested in das do ki kariye. That's what the preacher does. He's not a preacher. Preachers change their mind every day. They might not even have a personal experiences of the divine. He's not interested in telling you what to do or telling me what to do. He's like, I'm interested in capturing what we now even for tourism call experiences. He's capturing the experiences for us, such that, the inspiration might touch as well. Okay, let's look at another thing. He says, this breath, this current comes into life only when lives are presented as they were lived, moving and vibrant, engaged in their daily tasks, experiencing joys and sorrows, advancing, slipping, and then rising again. This is what we call now, how people say, you fall in love? Well, he's teaching us how to rise in love. Because if you just fallen, that's not enough. You have to rise in it. That's when you do things. And that's what he's like, this is life. Let's learn about Sikhi, spirituality, whatever else you want to learn. Their exposition in the language of history of Sri Guru Granth Sahib and the teachings of the 10 Gurus. That's what he himself wrote this. This is a direct translation. This is what he says I'm trying to do. So he's not trying to present simple history. He says that's not what I'm after. You can read other things for it. He actually edited those things. You can read those. But he says, I'm trying to capture the inspiration and the experiences. Okay. So Sundari and Satwant Kaur, you probably heard about them. Only thing I'm going to say is, let's look at what he himself says about them, why he wrote them. He says, I have based this on two major texts. This is how clearly he understood the history of the Panth. He says, I'm basing this on Sri Guru Panth Prakash and Twarikh Guru Khalsa. One is written by Giani Gyan Singh, other is written by Ratan Singh Pangu. You know what this means? Ratan Singh Pangu is the one, just so you know, when the British wanted to know who gave the Sikhs right to rule in South Asia, he's the one who goes and answers that. He says the Guru gave us that right. And he wrote a book about it. Bhai Vir Singh is saying, I have created historical fictions. That's the term we use today. When you can't talk about certain things because the government won't allow you, or even in the age of Snowden today, what Julian Assange has to deal with things. Even now, there are historical fictions created. This is 100 years ago, when forget the First Amendment and forget any, the kind of things which we have created in last 100 or last 10, or even what State Department is still trying to figure out how to do. In that era, he bases things on not what the British think, not what Indian thinks. He's basing it on what the Sikhs who lived the message of the Guru thinks. That's Ratan Singh Pangu, and that's Giani Gyan Singh. He says, I have taken their writings and based novels out of them. And what is it? In writing this book, our purpose is that by reading these accounts of bygone days, the Sikhs should become confirmed in their faith. And you can read the rest of the thing. He's basically, because he's in the chaos moment. In chaos, you need different ways to speak to different people. Koi poetry, koi novel, koi play, kuch activism, koi institution building. And that's exactly what he's after. This is his vision. This is his leadership. What is his activism now? Based on all the writings? Khalsa College, Amritsar. Probably the only building worth showing to anyone even today in Punjab. That should tell you his vision and leadership in this work. I mean, I took my kids there. Of course, I did traditional things. And I'm not including certain gurdwaras because they cannot be just called buildings. But outside of that, this is it. We don't even know how to even present Khalsa College Amritsar. You heard about Sikh education committees, and let me talk about Khalsa track societies next. Because this track society is not just a track society. What is it? Well, it had a publication called Nirgunayara, Gurbani's language again. The virtueless. It didn't have a name. The editorials of his newspaper didn't carry the name. This is what they printed there. They basically, anything which Singh Sabha needed to talk about, they printed through this. This today will be, if you're trying to create Singh Sabha movement 2.0 today, if you're trying to deal with the corruption in Punjab today, and this is an election year in Punjab, and what SGPC is going through, what your local Gurdwara is going through, and we all say, those who are interested, the Gurdwaras don't allow anything, government doesn't allow anything. He is in that mode. He's like, so it's okay, we'll publish on our own. And let's publish it such that the masses can read it, because they are after changing. It's a mass transformation, we call it. And he's after that, wrote hundreds and thousands of this. Generally speaking, it was about Punjabis, but specifically about Sikhs. He's also a co-founder of, Chief Khalsa Diwan, which I want to get into a little bit more, founder of Khalsa Samachar, Wazir-e-Hind Press. Why is this important? This is the reason it's important. When people say he did not work in activist field, this is just not true. On the Pog of Giani Dit Singh, this is what he read. Giani Dit Singh, of the multiple Singh Sabhas, was the leader of the Lahore Singh Sabha. Singh Sabha, which was no nonsense. Amritsar Singh Sabha, and Bhai Vir Singh is from Amritsar. He took positions, is what I'm trying to say. He took positions that people in Lahore know what they're doing. People in Amritsar are corrupt, even in his time. Because people in Amritsar, Singh Sabha Amritsar was very corrupt. They included chieftains as well. They included some aristocrats. They were rich. They said, thoda jai bhi kar lo, thoda jai bhi kar lo. Jiਵੇਂ ਅੱਜਕੱਲ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ. He's like, no. This Jawahar Singh, this Giani Dit Singh, and Professor Gurmukh Singh, they are doing the right thing. And this is what he says on Giani Dit Singh's Pog. On his last rites, he shows up, he writes a poem, those 4 lines are here, and you basically say, he's saying, this is a tribute. Jaga ke kaum pulakkad aap so gaye ho bedave. Giani Dit Singh is the one who woke up the whole Sikh nation, and today he's at asleep. And by the way, when he said this, the caste card is so strong in Punjab, like today. It's election year, everyone's invoking caste pride again. Caste card is so strong, when Giani Dit Singh was alive, they would not even give him prashad in Gurdwara. They used to tell him, go sit outside where the jode are. For him to stand up there and say, you are the man who woke up the Sikh nation, that's not just guts. It shows you the inner strength and ability to take on, including people in his own clan. Think about that. Okay, let's keep going. Khalsa Samachar. This is the newspaper he founded. He was the owner, he was the editor, he wrote the first editorials. And I just want to give you the sample, the beginning of his first editorial. He didn't take credit for it. You know what he wrote in his first editorial? Read, this is the basic translation. This is the age of education. He's telling this, why he started this paper, roughly translated. Education alone can raise the standards of the community, and you can read the rest of it, but at the end, he's basically saying, and he's telling why in Europe, how it affected people. He's telling how it's going to affect people in South Asia, and in Punjab, and among the Sikhs. And he basically saying, we need good journals. We need to create thought production, thought leadership. This is, look at the date. Volume 1, number 1, November 17th, 1899. And you heard how old he was back then. So if somebody tells me you're not old enough, or people don't take you seriously, you don't have resources, this is all the answers in one. While he's doing creative work, he's doing activist work on making sure the mass community awareness generation is happening. While on top of that, Homeopathic Center in Amritsar, Central Sikh Orphanage, I don't know if you guys have visited that. I stop by when I'm there. Even now, in last 30 years, it has produced one of the best ragis, Hazuri ragis. Few years ago, Dr. Neki's brother used to run it. These are lasting institutions. That's what institution means, something which survives way beyond you. What needs to be done with orphanage, single women you heard about, the printing press, the plays and the writings, blind asylums. I mean, you name it, and he was involved in it. You heard about the bank part. Yes, so I'll skip over it, but banking, just think about that, because eventually government centralized these banks, and he was founder of one of the banks, Punjab and Sindh Bank. Let's keep going in the, okay, it stopped again. There you go. Let's talk about, this is, I want to talk about this, and please bear with me here. I want to talk about this because there is trend now among certain people to question everything on him. And I want to take it head on. In fact, this is one of the happiest days in my life that we are talking about Bhai Vir Singh, because I've been wanting to do this for a long time, to talk about the man who has done, Gurbani ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਲਾਈਨ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਹੈ, ਆਪ ਨਾ ਦੇ ਚੁਰੂ ਭਰ ਪਾਣੀ, ਤਹਿ ਨਿੰਦੈ ਜੈ ਗੰਗਾ ਆਣੀ. They have nothing to contribute, but they're pulling down a man who has who has flowed the whole Ganga, which means it's not a small tributary. This is the most sacred river of the Indians, and Ganga is used as symbolism. Okay. So, they talk about that how Chief Khalsa Diwan worked with the British government. And I put question marks because there's not much to substantiate. I want to answer all of these because I want to talk about his political activism. They also say he was silent over Jallianwala Bagh massacre. He did not support the Ghadar movement, and he was actually a British agent. Yes, people have written that, and they are writing much more of that in the last 10 years because the man has stood 100 years tall, and he's still tall. So here are some things I want you to know about what he did about these things and what his real role was. Let me start with the first thing. Well, I've written some things here that you already heard, that he supported Singh Sabha, and he already fought with the Mahants and the state when he's countering the Singh Sabha, the bad Singh Sabhas, when he projected the good Singh Sabha of Singh Lahore. But I want you to know these two poems, and these are just excerpts from those poems. These are long poems. Let's talk about the first one. It's from Bijliyan de Har, and it's called Kutub di Lat. Has anyone ever heard of this or read this? I will be shocked, because Bijliyan de Har is not something people are reading. And this is from there. I want to just talk about the line. Again, the context is what? Context is what is happening in India. It's under the British. And this is before the Muslim League is coming, before there are two-nation theories, essentially, between India and Pakistan. This is during that time. Okay? He says, Kutub naam to Semitic jape, Lat naam to Hindu. So he's like, they're creating this tension between what we now call Semitic traditions, which is Islam is the representative. This is how Bhai Gurdas presents Guru Nanak, by the way. Look how he carries this. When he says, Tisar Panth, Semitic tradition versus Indian traditions, he says, now we are after the same battle again. Are you a Semitic, implying are you a Muslim, or are you a Lat, which means are you a Hindu? Asal, I'm going to skip, and you can see he uses the word Hindustani. He says, when we are fighting the empire, we are all Indians, this was the term, or the Bharatvashi or Hindustani in that context, not in today's Hindutva theories of Hindustan. Asal nasal pave hai koi. I'm not interested in what is your background. That's what he's saying. Nasal is literally the race, the caste. Tu hai Hindustani. Now, you tell me, the progressive writers I was referring to earlier from 1935 onwards, they all go back to this poem. And they say this is the first patriotic poem ever written against the British. But nobody's teaching us this poem. Only they know it, and even they don't acknowledge it fully now, because who's reading even those writers, Taniram Chatriks? Okay. Jadon sandarta darshan deve sab koi apni jane. He's basically saying focus on who we are, what we need to work on, not on whether you're a Hindu or a Muslim, whether you're an outsider or an insider. We are fighting an empire, and the focus needs to be how to fight that. Let's look at the second one. It's also from Bijliyan Dehar. This is the 37th poem, jehdi pehli hegi. Second one is the 41st poem. And the 41st one, which says Ganga Ram, is a very long poem, creatively written, beautifully written. It's a conversation between two parrots. And this is towards the end of the poem. Ki jad Ganga Ram naam da ek parrot hega, ਉਹ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰਨ ਲੱਗਿਆ ਦੇਖੋ ਹੁਣ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕੀ ਹੈ look at the words simplified for everyone to understand ਸਾਨੂੰ ਰੱਖ ਸੁਤੰਤਰ ਦਾਤੇ ਸੁਤੰਤਰ is sovereign free ਹਰ ਥਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਦਿਲ ਪੀੜ ਸੁਣੋ he said this is like Sikh tradition again Guru Nanak invoked ਦਸਵੇਂ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ invoke ਹਾਲ ਮੁਰੀਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਹਿਣਾ he's invoking all of Sikh tradition again on behalf of South Asia which is serving in subservience of the British Empire. He says, Dilpreet suno. ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਲੱਗ ਰਿਹਾ but ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਅੰਦਰਲੀ ਸੁਣ ਲਓ. They are hurting. People are hurting in India. ਸੁਣ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਪਸ਼ੂ ਦੀ ਦਾਤੇ. And by the way, Puran Singh invokes this too. He calls, people who are unsophisticated. ਪਸ਼ੂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ. In fact, he says ਅਸੀਂ ਜੰਗਲੀ ਹਾਂ, uncultured. He says we might not have sophistication. We might not know how to do it, but can you listen to the pain within from the loving angle? Ardas ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਕੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਕਦੀ ਨਾ ਰੱਖੀ ਮਿਹਰ ਖਣੋ ਤੇਰੀ ਮਿਹਰ ਨਾ ਰੁਕ ਜਾਵੇ your grace must not stop ਸਾਨੂੰ ਰੱਖ ਸੁਤੰਤਰ ਦਾਤੇ the giver keep us free ਬੰਦੀ ਸਾਥੋਂ ਦੂਰ ਟਹੇ do not keep us as captives. This is Baba Farid ji being invoked. ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਦਰ ਤੇ ਨਾ ਬਿਠਾਈ because what was happening back then? Baba Khadag Singh was leading the marches and 400 to 500,000 Sikhs were spending time in jails because they were trying to free the Gurdwaras under the British. This is before the Satyagraha movement of Gandhi. They hadn't seen anything yet. Gandhi copied what Bhai Vir Singh is writing and what Sikhs are practicing in Punjab. And then look, ਮੂੰਹ ਤਕੀਏ ਨਾ ਕਦੇ ਕੈਦ ਦਾ ਕਦੇ ਗੁਲਾਮੀ ਆਵੇ ਨਾ we don't want any slavery we have been enslaved we know ਕਦੇ ਨਾ ਆਵੇ but we don't ever want this again do not keep us subservient this is Guru Granth Sahib Baba Farid ji ਸ਼ਬਦ ਫਰੀਦਾ ਬਾਰ ਪਰਾਏ ਬੈਸਨਾ ਸਾਈਂ ਮੁਝੇ ਨਾ ਦੇ ਜੇ ਤੂੰ ਐਵੇਂ ਰੱਖਸੀ ਜਿਉਂ ਸਰੀਰੋਂ ਲੈ he's describing that and then look ਗੋਲਾ ਕਦੇ ਨਾ ਕਰੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਗੋਲਾ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਦਾ ਟਰਮ ਹੈਗਾ which means slave ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਲਾਲਾ ਗੋਲਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਰੱਬ ਦਾ ਹੋਣਾ slave ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਨਾ slave ਗੋਲਾ ਕਦੇ ਨਾ ਕਰੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਪਿੰਜਰੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਾਵੇ ਨਾ ਪਿੰਜਰਾ is a cage again literally cage ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਖੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ okay ਦਾਸ ਬਣਾਣਾ ਖਿਦਮਤ ਪਾਵੇ we don't want to be anyone's ਦਾਸ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ ਖਿਦਮਤ is subservience look at the words very direct. And he says, Sadi khul khuhavina. Khul is, let me be free. I don't want anyone telling me what to do. Maybe this is where Professor Puran Singh named his book when he called it Khulle Kund and Khulle Maidan. The inspiration Puran Singh gets from Bhai Vir Singh. Azadi haq tera ditta. He says, we are not seeking azadi. This is Ratan Singh Pangu speaking. We are not seeking this from you. We got this from the divine. Azadi haq tera ditta sabnu daat karai to. Let everyone realize this gift of freedom. Okay. So I think I've said enough about his role in inspiring mass civil disobedience, to marches, to the revolutionaries. And this is the last thing I want to share. Those who call him the agent of the British, this is the secret report by the British government on Bhai Vir Singh, why he's dangerous. I've truncated it, but let's read it. It says, Vir Singh is mentioned from many sources as a leading figure in the Sikh revival and as a disloyal to the court, disloyal to the crown, that is, to the British crown. Okay? The same opinion is entertained of him by local officers, which means Amritsar's DC, which today still exists, deputy commissioners we call them. In Indian systems, now they are IS officers. Just so you know the impact of DCs, even today, they are the bosses, they are the civil bosses of the town. Even today, 2 of our takhts are governed by the DC in Patna and Hazur Sahib. This is even today. This is how powerful DCs are. He says local officers also say he's disloyal to the crown. He is reported to be making overtures to the head Granthi of the Golden Temple with a view to bringing that institution under the control of the Neo-Sikh party. So are you telling me that he was not aware of what SGPC of the time, Shromani Akali Dal of the time? He's working with them. He's convincing the religious people it's time to clean it up. Okay, at present, he has complete control of the Khalsa Tract Society. Remember, this was how he propagated the ideas of activism. He's a member of the council of the Khalsa College, so this is all recorded. He may safely be regarded as a zealous neo-Sikh and thoroughly anti-British. Look at the date. It's 1911. Before the revolutionaries were dreaming to become revolutionaries, he was not just preparing the ground, he was already creating the right ideas and alliances. This is him. Anyone who tells you otherwise, don't buy that BS. Now, I'm almost done. This is basically just to overwhelm all of us. This is just his literary contribution. I don't think we even can name all the books he's written. While he's writing, just think of this. This is all his stuff he has done. Okay. Then he's been recognized, just so you know, he's been recognized and through certain awards, from literature awards to posthumously being awarded by Sahitya Academy and Padam Bhushans, but he himself wanted to be hidden. And the term Sixth River of Panjab for the first time was used by Harinder Chattopadhyay, and he's the man who called him. Just so you know, he's the brother of Sarojini Naidu. Those of you know the Indian independence movements. So these are not the regular people. These are the forerunners of Indian thought. He's the man who says, yes, we all know about Punjab, and yes, we know about his 5 rivers, but here is the Sixth River of Panjab. He's the one who first penned it. Let's keep going, and I'm almost done. This is Professor Puran Singh's tribute to him. I don't know how to explain this. I'm just going to come to the last line. I mean, I've underlined certain things. Let's do a comparison. He says, a vulgar eye cannot see him. I think just take a pause and understand that. A vulgar eye cannot see what Bhai Vir Singh is. Period. And then look at the end what he saw. He says, he is the true poet of the East who opens out eyes to see the beloved. ਇਹ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਆਈਡੀਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹਦੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੁਰੂ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਕੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ. He says, the way you know you have met the Guru, Satgur milya dib drist hoi, the way you see changes. This is Guru Granth Sahib talking about. This is what Bhai Vir Singh did. He changed the way we looked at anything and everything. This is why he became so powerful. So vulgar eye is not going to like him. It cannot even appreciate him, forget liking him. And those who are seeking beloved everywhere, har thaan te oh sahib nu lab rahe ne, they will see him. Puran Singh said, this is what he did to me. He opened my eyes so I can start seeing the beloved. Anywhere and everywhere, regardless of the situation. See, there is a rain of glory everywhere. ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਰਿਮ ਚਿਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਨਾ, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਧਾਰਾ ਆਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਉਹ ਇਹ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. Now, I'm going to end, this is my last slide. And why do I end with this slide? I don't know, we talk about women and feminism. I put these 3 pictures there for you to look at. 2 of them are sitting in the audience. Third one, the first one in there, the black and white one, is Sardarni Mahinder Kaur, the one who kept Bhai Vir Singh's legacy alive when the universities couldn't figure out how to do it through Panchavati. So who's really keeping his legacy alive? I think one who kept doing it. Many people don't even know. Some of you probably visited her in Dehradun. Maybe. She's the one who kept his legacy alive through writings, continuous writings, every week. And now she's not there. I see Nikki Guninder Kaur, and that's why I have her there, Dr. Singh there, Dr. Kaur's photo, because first PhD to connect the dots from Guru Nanak and ended with Bhai Vir Singh was her work. Otherwise, Bhai Vir Singh is not even mentioned. She did it. That was her dissertation, the feminine principle in the Sikh view of the transcendent. And then the one who calls her Pitaji, Ini Kaur, she's going to speak earlier, she's doing this in her poetic writings, in her journey with the gurus. It's all Bhai Vir Singh coming out. Who's keeping their legacy alive? I will submit to you, a lot of people might be talking like me and others running some other institutes. I'll be honest, in life, you see it, in documentation, you see it through these 3 women. I'm going to end with, first poem I learned about Bhai Vir Singh's. I'm going to actually share that. And when I didn't quite get, because Punjabi wasn't my first language. I was 13, and I spoke Hindi until the age of 13 because I was born in Jhansi, UP. Then I ended up in Kansas City. That's when I really discovered him through some translations and eventually Punjabi. And the poem, which first one I knew was where he's talking about from a Kambadi Kalai. And Kambadi Kalai ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੇਨ ਗੱਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਨਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਚੁਭੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਕਿ am I even prepared if the divine came in front of me to even recognize this is divine? Because we are so misled up here, right? And not just us, this is a human behavior. Guru Amar Das Padsha lived not even 25 kilometers from Guru Nanak, never met him because he wasn't looking. So if you're not looking, and he says, Arsha da Chan, Jimmy Khadota, the moon of the heavens descended on the earth. Jind gayi mein to nirkhi na parkhi, but I couldn't tell who it was. Why? Although I dreamed, and he says, I dreamed about you. Supne vich tusi mile asanu, asan tagal vakadi pai. I dreamt about you, that yes, I'm going to meet you, and I'm going to run to you, and I'm going to embrace you. And he describes that moment, ki kiਵੇਂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਚੁੱਪ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਕੁਕੇਂਦੜੀ ਚਰਖੀ, right? ਤਿਲਕ ਗਈ ਮੇਰੇ ਹੱਥ ਦੀ ਪੂਣੀ. So he's describing ਸਾਡੀ ਕੰਬਦੀ ਰਹੀ ਕਲਾਈ, you know the lines, that I'm trembling, but it's all in the dream. But when you appeared in life, I didn't recognize you. So ਸਾਡਾ ਕਿਤੇ ਇਹ ਹਾਲ ਨਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਡ੍ਰੀਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਈਏ, ਗਾਉਂਦੇ ਰਹਿ ਜਾਈਏ, ਪੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਰਹਿ, which we are going to. But ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਇੱਕ personal touch, personal relationship, personal ਜਾਂਚ, whatever you want to call it, some personal inspiration needs to be there such that you actually are one with the divine, you recognize the divine right here on this earth, because that's what his writings are about. Dealing with anything and everything on this earth, you are driven, you have vaslo ore mukamna koi. I personally am looking for that union, but while you're doing it, you're engaged in anything and everything in life, and it is about mass transformation. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.